Good morning, good afternoon. This is Ivan Portilla with the IBM Edge Application Manager team. Today, we're going to see a demonstration of using software deployment policies using IAM policies. Here, we're looking at the IAM hub or dashboard. In the dashboard, we can see 4 tabs. We can see the nodes that are registered with your hub. We can see the service, the edge services that have been deployed into the hub. We can see the patterns that are using software deployment policies and the policies. So if we go back to nodes, this is the graphical view, but we can also switch to the list view. And here we can see that we only have one ACMED development machine. So for this demonstration, we're going to use a development machine and 2 cameras, VMs, to show you deployment policies. And they're all connecting to the hub. So if we go back here, we see that only we have the development machine. If we click on it, we can see the properties of this development machine, where we can tell that the system has these open horizon properties that you get by default, details such as the number of CPUs, the architecture, the memory of that machine. We also see if your particular node has some constraints, and the aggregation of policies and constraints is what makes your node policy. If we get out of there, click in nodes, and we're going to register the 2 VMs that we're going to use for these demonstrations. So I am logging into a machine here, and the command that I'm going to use is HCN register. That's the only command that I need to use in this machine, and I will not be touching it anymore after this. So with that, the machine will talk to the hub using the lightweight agent that has been installed on the machine, and it's going to register. From now on, I'm just going to watch. I'm just going to see what is running on the machine with running a watch command. Here is my second machine. This is my camera B. The same command, HCN register, very simple command, and it is going to register that particular node with the hub. If now I go back into my hub and my dashboard, and I will do a refresh of the page, and I go into my list view, I can see I have 2 new nodes, the camera A and the camera B nodes. So let's take a look at camera A. Again, these properties you get by default with the Open Horizon agent, and I'm going to add 2 properties to this. The first one is going to be the type, and it's going to be a security camera. And the other property that I'm going to set up is GPU enable, and because it doesn't have a GPU, I'm going to just set it to false. Hit done, and that gets saved, security and GPU, plus I'm going to add a constraint. The constraint of this is the purpose, and I'm going to specify a constraint that only services that are security monitoring are going to run on this node. Again, the combination of the properties and constraints is what gives me the policy of this node. So these are my properties and constraints for camera A node. Now, if I go back to camera B, I'm going to add the same properties and constraints. So again, my constraint type. But for this, it's going to be a smart camera because it has a GPU enabled. So I add the GPU enabled property, and I'm going to set it to true. In addition, I'm going to make sure you hit done to save that, and I'm going to add 2 purposes. I'm going to use the purpose that we established before of security monitoring, plus I can either run services that has a purpose of smart video analytics. So the combination of those 2 constraints and my properties are going to determine what services are going to run on this camera. Hit done, and I have both purposes security monitoring and purpose smart video analytics with the property type SmartCam and GPU enables to true. Okay, now that I have set up my node policies, I'm going to set up I'm going to deploy a service to run on each of these nodes. So if I go into my services tab and pick the ACMED motion detection service, I can see it has been deployed into my hub, and currently it has a constraint. The developers initially thought that they were going to need this much memory to run, but they tell me I can run it with just 1 megabyte. So that will 1 gigabyte. That will be enough, and I'm going to save that. Now I'm going to deploy the first service, this service into the first node, into camera A. So I'm going to create a deployment policy. I go into this screen and I give it a name, IEAM CPU Demo. It's going to run motion detection, and I'm going to click next. My constraint in order to run is going to be the type. So when the type of the node is equal to security camera, that service is going to be deployed. And next, I don't touch these rollback settings or no health settings, and I make sure the policy, the deployment policy looks okay. So run this service, IEAM, into this with this constraint. Run this service, IEAM motion detection service, when the constraint is met that the type is equal to security camera. So I deploy the service, and basically what it's going to do is going to start a negotiation between the agreement, make an agreement between the agent running on the node with the ACBOC running on the hub. Basically what we're doing here is matching the properties of the camera aid with the properties and constraints of the service and the deployment policy. So notice that I selected type security camera on the deployment as a constraint, which matches a property security camera on the node. Additionally, remember that I was able to edit my service constraint and make sure the service will run under 1 gigabyte of memory. If I look at my shell here, I can see that an agreement has been created and is available into the node. So if I go back here and go back into the nodes and open up camera 8 nodes, I can see that service is being triggered there. So let's take a look. So that will be here. This is my node running on 8080. And yes, it's detecting, my camera is detecting people, and I'm going to analyze, I'm going to execute. Remember, this is CPU only. So when I click analyze, it's giving us a very slow frame rate, like 5 or 6 frames per second. So the detection works, but it's very, very slow. So if we go back now into the node, into my hub, I'm going to deploy the service into my second node, into my camera B. So I go back into services, and I'm going to deploy a service that has been optimized for GPU. So this is my GPU service, and I'm going to add I'm going to touch the services and properties here of this service, and I'm going to add a deployment policy. So here I give it a name, IEAM GPU Demo motion detection. Make sure I have the right service selected. Hit next. Now my constraint is going to be GPU enabled. I want to run this service on nodes that have that GPU enable property sets to true. Don't touch the rollback settings of the null health settings, and the summary looks good, so I'm going to deploy that service into my camera B node. If I look here into my camera B, this is the reason this service is going to deploy there. I added a constraint in my deployment policy, GPU enable equals to true, that matches a property into my camera B properties. It's marked GPU enables equals to true. I didn't have to touch any of the constraints of the service, but I have a purpose set up that this particular GPU will only run for smart video analytics. So now if we go back here, and if I do ACN agreement list command to see what's running on that particular node, I can see that it started a negotiation with between the agreement, between the ACBOC and the agent, making an agreement. Running again, I can see that the agreement has been accepted. In a few seconds, it will start. So by running again one more time, I can see now it's executed. So that means that if I go back into my hub, go back into policies, go back into nodes, diving into camera B node, I can see that now I have a new service, the Active Motion Detection service for GPUs running on camera B, which means that if I go and open up that and reload the page, I can see that I have the GPU service running there. So if I analyze that camera with GPU, I can see it's doing a much better job, giving me a better frame rate, and it's detecting the person, and it's telling me that it's the person's first visit into my home. So I have made changes to A and B. So now I've been told by my developers that camera A has been upgraded. It's going to have a GPU enabled camera. So what I'll do, I go into the device and change this property of GPU enable. I'm gonna set it to true. And that will allow me to have that service running there. But remember, I need to also have a constraint. So I need to add a second constraint with an OR that my purpose now is going to be equals to Smart Video Analytics. So the combination of both GPU enabled equals to true and this purpose equals to Smart Video Analytics is going to give me the ability to run both services on this node. So again, my node will negotiate the agreement between the agent and the ACBot, and in a few seconds I will be able to see that those two services have been deployed into my camera A node. So that's what's happening in the background. Remember, this is my policy. I switch this GPU enabled to true, and then I set up a second purpose of Smart Video Analytics. So if I look here, I can see that both services are now running on my machine. If I check out and refresh my page to see what services are running there, I can see that in a few seconds, both camera A will have both the GPU and the CPU service running there when this negotiation is completed. And at that point, I will be able to run both services. As you can tell, I have the CPU and the GPU running on my camera A. If I go back into that particular, I remember I have my CPU, but now I change the port to the GPU service, and here it is. It's been deployed into my camera A, which now has been upgraded to a GPU. If I do the analyze, you can see I have GPU enable analysis inference on that service, and I'm detecting the person, and I can tell that that person has been, this is the first visit to my home. Now, the final example I'm gonna show you is using destination policies, and this is done with a feature in the hub called the model management system. So what I'm gonna do, I'm going to back here into my node B, and the developers have added acceleration to my GPU that is called a tensor processing unit, a TPU. So I'm going to add another property called GPU type equals TPU. So by adding that particular property, I can now go into my development machine. So I'm going to open my development machine here, which is, remember, it's not neither node. This is my Mac. If I do a directory, you can tell that I am my Mac, and I'm going to publish an object through the hub into that camera B node. So when I publish that node, it's going to deploy to the cloud sync service, then down into the edge sync service, and then into my CPU service. To look at the properties of that, I can tell that I have a constraint that says I'm only going to deploy this into nodes which GPU type has been selected to TPU. And if you recall, when we set up the node, I added camera B, I added a property called GPU type. GPU type equals TPU. So here is we can monitor when that object is being delivered to my node. So if I list MMS object, I can tell that it has been delivered into my camera B node. So now if I go back into my camera B demonstration, which is this one, I can reload that service with the GPU TPU, and in a few seconds I will be able to see the new service. So if I go back here, make sure it's been refreshed, look at the node, camera B node has my GPU enabled. So if I go back here, my new service with a different social distancing module has been deployed into my camera B. And when analyzed with the TPU enable service, I can now do social distancing. So these two couples are too close together and it's giving me an alert. The same with these people in the back. So you have seen the use of deployment policies, and you can tell how a combination of the node policy, the deployment policy, the service policies, and the destination policies with MMS will allow you to finally deploy services into your different nodes. So we're ready for when you want to schedule a demonstration or a follow-up garage. Thank you very much.